What do you call a crime so horrifying? It steals the voice of those sworn to solve it. A 10-year-old girl, gone in a breath. A confession that twisted the knife deeper. And a truth so buried, it haunts an entire state. This is the story of Emmaleigh Barringer, a case where every answer only leads to a darker question. There are cases that carve themselves into the minds of those who dare to investigate them. Cases so disturbing, they cling to the soul like frostbite. Cases that turn veteran detectives into ghosts of themselves, staring at case files in the dead of night, begging for answers they know they'll never find. This is one of those cases. A 10-year-old girl, a vanishing act so flawless, it defied logic, a confession that only deepened the abyss, and a truth so grotesque, it left even the most stoic investigators speechless. This is the story of Emmaleigh Barringer, a story where the silence screams louder than any evidence ever could. A town where time moves slower, where the Appalachian Mountains cradle the horizon like ancient guardians, and the streets smell of coal dust and honeysuckle. McDowell County, West Virginia, population 934, a place where everyone knows the mailman's first name, where church potlucks are battlegrounds for the best casserole, and where kids pedal bikes down gravel roads without a single parent glancing at the clock. Here, stranger danger was a myth, a fairy tale, because nothing bad ever happened, until it did. September 2017, the air turned crisp. The leaves began to blush red, and in this town that trusted its shadows, evil didn't kick down the door. It didn't roar. It slithered in, silent as a snake through tall grass, and stole Emmaleigh Barringer from her own backyard. What does innocence sound like? Maybe it's the squeal of a child chasing fireflies as dusk paints the sky, or the rustle of a well-loved teddy bear tucked under an arm. Its fur matted from years of bedtime stories. For Emmaleigh Barringer, innocence was a kaleidoscope of little joys. The strawberry lip gloss she'd sneak from her mother's purse. The way she'd dissolve into giggles when her dad pretended to trip over the cat. The pride in her voice when she announced she'd made the principal's list at school. September 24th, 2017, began like any other Sunday. Pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. A game of tag with her brother in the backyard. A pink bicycle left lying on its side in the grass, as if she'd simply stepped away for a moment. But by nightfall, that bicycle became a relic, a shrine, because Emmaleigh, still in her mismatched socks and glittery butterfly hair clips, vanished. No torn clothing, no footprints, not even a single bark from the family dog, just empty space where a child should have been. 1 minute, she was there. The next, the world turned monochrome. And all that remained was the echo of a question no parent should ever have to ask. Where does a 10-year-old girl go when the ground itself refuses to give up its secrets? A child disappears in broad daylight. No struggle, no trace, just gone. How does it happen? How does the world swallow a little girl whole? For Emmaleigh Barringer's family, that question became a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. The search began immediately. Neighbors spilled into the streets, flashlights cutting through the darkness like desperate fireflies. Search dogs sniffed every inch of the backyard, their handlers praying for a single clue. Helicopters thrummed overhead, their spotlights painting the Appalachian hills in ghostly white. Volunteers, hundreds of them, scoured forests, abandoned mines, and creek beds, calling her name until their voices cracked. Flyers with Emmaleig's smiling face plastered every gas station, diner, and grocery store window. For 72 hours, McDowell County held its breath, clinging to hope like a lifeline. But hope is fragile. By day 4, the cracks began to show. Detectives re-interviewed everyone, family, friends, the mailman who delivered packages that Tuesday. They traced every phone call, every text message, every social media post. Nothing. Security cameras near her home? Blank. Not a single blurry figure or suspicious car. It was as if the earth had opened up and pulled her into its core. Then came the theories. Maybe she'd wandered into the woods, disoriented. But Emmaleigh knew those trails like the back of her hand. Maybe a wild animal? But there were no remains. No blood. No shred of clothing. Maybe a kidnapping? But no ransom note. No taunting calls. Just silence. The worst theory came in whispers. Someone they knew took her. Someone in their circle. A neighbor. A friend. A face they'd smiled at in church. Detectives combed through registered offenders in the area. But every alibi checked out. Every lead dissolved like smoke. And then the tip. A man claimed he'd seen a blue pickup truck circling the neighborhood that afternoon. a truck with out-of-state plates. For a moment, the case caught fire. Police traced similar vehicles across 3 counties. They interrogated drivers, ran background checks, even searched a junkyard where a matching truck had been crushed. Dead end. Another call. A woman swore she'd spotted Emmaleigh at a roadside diner 50 miles away, eating pancakes with a bearded man. Security footage revealed a different girl, a different nightmare. Weeks passed. The search parties thinned. The flyers faded under the sun. Emmaleig's family stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped breathing unless it was to beg for answers. Detectives worked 20-hour days, chasing shadows, their desks buried under maps scribbled with question marks. Then, the unthinkable. The FBI got involved. Evidence bags filled with dirt samples from the backyard. Cadaver dogs searched the property again. Psychics phoned in visions of water and a man in a red shirt. All noise. No signal. Months turned to years. Emmaleig's bedroom stayed frozen in time, stuffed animals on the bed, homework half finished on her desk. Her mother would sit on the floor, clutching Emmaleig's favorite sweater, inhaling the faint scent of strawberry shampoo that lingered in the fabric. Her father stopped going to work, stopped talking, stopped everything except pacing the backyard at 3 a.m., flashlight in hand, muttering, "She's here somewhere. She has to be." But the worst part? The silence. No taunting letters. No cryptic clues. No body. Just a void where a child should have been. Detectives began to doubt themselves. Had they missed something? Overlooked a detail? Was there a monster hiding in plain sight, laughing at their failure? Then, for years later, a phone call. Sound design, the clock stops. A single, shrill phone ring pierces the silence. A man named David Moran walked into a police station 200 miles away. He confessed to killing Emmaleigh Barringer. Finally, answers. Except there were none. Moran's story unraveled faster than he could tell it. He claimed he'd accidentally hit Emmaleigh with his car while driving high on meth. Panicked, he said he'd buried her body near a riverbank. But when police combed the area he described, they found nothing. No disturbed soil. No fibers. No DNA. Just another dead end wearing the mask of a breakthrough. Was Moran a desperate attention seeker? A guilty man twisting the truth? Or a pawn in a much darker game? The questions multiplied. The silence deepened. And Emmaleig's case, once a blazing fire, faded into embers, cold, unresolved, and haunting everyone it touched. Because here's the truth. When a child vanishes without a trace, it doesn't just break a family. It breaks a community. It breaks the faith that justice will ever come. And it leaves behind a puzzle with missing pieces. Pieces that, somewhere, someone is still holding. For years. That's how long Emmaleigh Barringer's family waited for a miracle. 4 years of birthdays without her laughter. 4 years of detectives chasing ghosts. 4 years of a town holding its breath until a single phone call shattered the silence. On March 12, 2021, a man named David Moran walked into the West Virginia State Police headquarters. He was calm, too calm. No tears, no shaking hands, just a blank stare and 4 words that dropped like stones. "I killed Emmaleigh Barringer." Finally, answers. Except there were none. Moran sat in a cold interrogation room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and spun a story so flimsy, it felt like a sick joke. He claimed he'd been driving near Emmaleig's home that September day in 2017. High on meth, he said, swerving, not paying attention. Then a thump, a little girl lying in the road. Panic. He swore he'd put her body in his car, driven to a remote riverbank, and buried her in a shallow grave. Detectives leaned in, pens poised. Finally, a thread to pull, but threads unravel. First red flag. Moran couldn't describe Emmaleig's clothing that day. Not the color, not the style, nothing. It was years ago. He shrugged. "I don't remember." Second red flag. The accident he described would have left evidence, broken glass, skid marks, blood. But forensic teams had combed that road for weeks in 2017. They'd found nothing. Not a scratch. Not a drop of DNA. Third red flag. Moran led detectives to a riverbank 30 miles outside town. For hours, they dug. Shovels bit into dirt. Cadaver dogs circled. News helicopters hovered overhead, broadcasting the search live. But with every scoop of soil, hope drained away. No bones. No backpack. No butterfly hair clips. Just mud and rotting leaves. So why confess? Maybe guilt. Maybe madness. Or maybe something darker. Here's what we know about David Moran. A 34-year-old construction worker with a history of drug arrests. No ties to Emmaleig's family. No record of violence toward children. Just a man who'd spent years in and out of jail. His life a cycle of addiction and dead ends. But when pressed, his story kept shifting. First, he said he'd buried Emmaleigh alone. Then he claimed a friend helped him. But he couldn't name the friend, couldn't describe their face, couldn't explain why this friend had never come forward. Detectives played hardball. Show us the grave, they demanded. Moran took them to a second site, then a third. Each time, the result was the same, empty earth. Meanwhile, Emmaleig's family waited. Her mother, Tanya, sat in a cramped police station hallway, clutching a photo of her daughter. Is it her? She kept asking. Did you find her? But the detective's silence said it all. Forensic experts re-examined Moran's car, a rusted pickup truck he'd owned since 2015. They tore out seats, peeled back floor mats, scanned for blood under UV lights. Still nothing. No hair, no fibers, no signs of a child ever being inside. Prosecutors faced a nightmare. A confession without proof is just words. And Moran's words were full of holes. Why come forward now? Detectives asked. I wanted to clear my conscience, he said, but consciences don't wait 4 years to speak. Not unless there's something to gain. Rumors spread. Some said Moran was covering for someone else, a relative. A dealer, a secret accomplice. Others thought he craved fame. The kind that comes with a headline like, "Man confesses to unsolved murder." A few wondered if he'd been paid to muddy the waters, to send investigators chasing shadows while the real killer walked free. But without evidence, theories are just noise. Moran was charged with false reporting and obstructing justice. A slap on the wrist. He served 6 months in jail, then vanished back into the world, leaving detectives and the Barringer family trapped in the same nightmare. The worst part, his confession broke the case wide open, only to reveal a deeper darkness. Because now, there were 2 possibilities, both unbearable. Moran was lying, which meant Emmaleig's killer was still out there, watching, laughing, knowing the truth might never surface. Moran was telling a twisted half-truth. Maybe he was involved, but not alone. Maybe the real monster used him as a decoy. Either way, Emmaleig's case went colder than ever. Her family stopped giving interviews. The town's anger curdled into resignation. Even the detectives who'd worked the case retired early, their files gathering dust in evidence lockers. But here's what keeps me up at night. Confessions are supposed to end stories. They're supposed to bring closure, justice, a reason to stop looking over your shoulder. But David Moran's confession did the opposite. It turned this case into a hall of mirrors, where every reflection is a lie, and the truth is always just out of reach. So tonight, as you tuck your kids into bed, remember Emmaleigh Barringer. Remember that some mysteries don't have answers. Some doors don't get closed. And some confessions, they're not the end. They're the beginning of a deeper, darker silence. Closure. It's a word we throw around like it's something you can buy at a store. A box to check, a door to shut. But for Tanya Barringer, closure is a ghost. It's the shadow that flickers in the corner of her eye when she walks past her daughter's empty bedroom. It's the echo of a laugh that isn't there when she sets 4 plates at the dinner table instead of 3. It's waking up at 2 a.m., drenched in sweat, screaming Emmaleig's name into the dark, because in her dreams, her little girl is still alive, still reaching for her, still there. Tanya doesn't sleep anymore. She paces. She stares at the backyard through cracked blinds, flashlight in hand, convinced she'll see Emmaleigh chasing fireflies again. She keeps her daughter's backpack by the front door, still packed for 4th grade. The granola bar inside is fossilized now. The juice box collapsed from rot. But to throw it away would be to admit Emmaleigh isn't coming home. And Tanya, she's not ready to bury hope. Her husband, Steve, stopped talking about their daughter. Not because he doesn't care, because the rage is too heavy. He spends nights in the garage, fists clenched, staring at tools he once used to fix bikes and build treehouses. Now, they're just weapons waiting for a target. When detectives told him David Moran's confession was a lie, Steve put his fist through a wall, then another, and another, until his knuckles split open. And the hallway looked like a war zone. "Give me 5 minutes alone with that man," he told police. 5 minutes, and I'll get the truth. They didn't let him. And Emmaleig's brother? The boy who once played tag with her in the yard? He's 15 now. Old enough to understand his sister isn't lost. Old enough to know what gone really means. He sleeps with a baseball bat under his bed, stares at strangers too long in the grocery store. When his friends joke about kidnapping scenes in movies, he walks out of the room. This is what unresolved grief does. It doesn't fade. It mutates. But the Barringers aren't the only ones trapped in this nightmare. McDowell County used to be the kind of place where you'd wave at every car that passed. Now, parents hover at bus stops, gripping their kids' hands a little too tight. Porch lights stay on all night. Curtains twitch at the sound of a barking dog. The town's anger isn't loud. It's a slow, toxic rot. Take the diner on Main Street. For years, regulars sipped coffee and traded gossip about fishing trips and football games. Now, they trade theories. Moran didn't act alone, mutters an old man stirring creamer into his mug. That confession was a cover-up. Hisses a waitress refilling his cup. Police botched the case. Snaps a truck driver slamming his fork down. The air hums with suspicion. Because when trust shatters, it cuts everyone in the room. Even the town's landmarks became haunted. The riverbank where Moran claimed he buried Emmaleigh? Locals avoid it now. Teens dare each other to visit at midnight. But none stay longer than 5 minutes. It feels wrong, one says. Like the ground itself is angry. And then there are the missing posters. For years ago, they were bright, urgent, laminated to survive rain. Now, they're skeletons sun-bleached, torn, clinging to telephone poles like old scars. Emily's smile is faded. Her eyes are cracked from weather. But the town won't take them down. To remove them would be a betrayal, an acceptance. So they stay, even as the glue gives way and the corners curl into fists. The worst part? The silence. No new leads. No arrests. No body. Just a void where justice should be. Detectives who worked the case quit or transferred. Some retired early, their faces gaunt, their hands trembling at the mention of Emily's name. One investigator, who asked to remain anonymous, told me, "This case, it's like chasing smoke. You think you've got it, and then it's gone, and you're left wondering if you imagined the whole thing." But here's the truth. When a town stops believing in justice, it starts believing in monsters. Neighbors eye each other differently now. The man who lives alone at the end of the street, he's too quiet. They whisper. The woman who drives a blue truck like the one in the tip? Why's she always staring at kids? Even the mailman gets side-eyed for lingering too long at a mailbox. And every year, on September 24th, the town holds a vigil. They gather at the park with candles and stuffed animals. They sing hymns. They pray. And for a moment, it feels like healing. But when the flames die down and the crowd disperses, Tanya stays. She kneels in the grass, clutching a photo of Emmaleigh, and whispers the same question over and over. "Where are you?" No one answers. The Appalachian wind just sweeps through the trees, carrying the question into the hills, where it lingers, unanswered, like everything else in this case. Because this is the fallout of a crime without resolution. It's not just a family broken. It's a town unraveling. It's the death of trust, the birth of paranoia, and the crushing weight of knowing that somewhere, someone holds the truth, and they're laughing. So tonight, as you hug your children a little tighter, remember this: evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's the silence between the screams, the gap in the story, the face you've seen 1,000 times, but suddenly don't recognize. And for Emmaleigh Barringer's family, the silence is the loudest sound of all. There are crimes we solve, crimes we forget, and crimes that burrow into our souls and never let go. Emmaleigh Barringer's case isn't just about a missing girl. It's about the questions left screaming into the void, questions with no answers, only echoes, questions that keep detectives awake at 3 a.m., staring at ceiling cracks, wondering why? Why her? Why here? And why? After all these years, does the silence feel like a taunt? Let's start with the first question. Why Emmaleigh? She wasn't wealthy. Her family had no enemies. She was just a kid who loved glitter and giggled at cartoons. There was no ransom demand, no history of threats, no reason, at least none that makes sense to the rest of us. And that's what chills the bone, because if evil can snatch a child at random, in broad daylight, in a town where everyone knows everyone, then where is safe? Detectives combed through her life, searching for a motive that didn't exist. Was it a grudge against her parents? A stalker? A crime of opportunity? But every door they opened led to a brick wall. Emily's world was small, simple, and innocent, and that innocence made her invisible. until it made her a target. Now, the second question, why this town? McDowell County wasn't just a dot on the map. It was a place where people still believed in good, where they left car keys in ignitions and Christmas presents on porches, where stranger danger was something that happened on the news. Not here. But Emmaleig's disappearance didn't just break that trust, it vaporized it. Think about that. A town's identity, built over generations, shattered in a single afternoon. Now, parents eye their neighbors like suspects. Kids are warned not to play past the driveway. The local park, once buzzing with laughter, sits empty, because if it happened here, it can happen anywhere. And that's a truth too heavy to carry. But the third question is the one that claws deepest. Why the silence? Most crimes leave breadcrumbs. A fingerprint, a witness, a slip of the tongue. But this? Nothing. Not a single credible sighting in 7 years. No body. No confession that holds up. No closure. Just stillness. And in that stillness, the mind races. Was Emmaleigh taken by someone who knew the town's rhythms? Someone who melted into the backdrop of daily life? A face so familiar, it became invisible? Or was it a stranger passing through, a ghost who vanished into the mountains, leaving no trail? Here's what we know. Silence isn't passive. It's aggressive. It mocks. It dares you to keep searching, knowing you'll find nothing. And in this case, the silence has accomplices. Take David Moran's confession. For a few hours, it felt like progress. Finally, a name to hate, a face to blame. But when his story crumbled, the silence came back louder. Because now, there's a new question. Why confess to a crime you didn't commit? Was it guilt over something else? A twisted bid for infamy? Or did someone put him up to it? Someone still out there. Pulling strings? The cops don't know. The family doesn't know. And the truth, it might be worse than we imagine. But let's talk about the detectives. The ones who've aged a decade in 7 years. The ones who keep Emmaleig's file on their desks. Yellowed notes spilling out like scars. They'll tell you the hardest part isn't the dead ends. It's the patterns. In most cases, you find a rhythm, a logic, however warped. But this, it defies everything. No sexual predator history in the area. No financial gain. No revenge plot. Just a gaping hole where reason should be. One investigator put it like this. It's like trying to solve a puzzle blindfolded. You don't even know if all the pieces are there. And then there's the family. Tanya Barringer doesn't ask why anymore. She used to. She'd scream it at detectives, at pastors, at the sky. Now, she whispers it to Emmaleig's photo, as if her daughter might answer. But the photo just stares back, frozen in time, a smile that never grows older. Steve, Emmaleig's dad, has a different theory. Someone knows, he says. Someone's out there, living their life, going to work, eating dinner, and they know. He's right. Secrets don't stay buried. They fester. They itch. And someday, maybe, that itch will be too much. But until then, the questions pile up. Why did the dogs lose her scent at the edge of the yard? Why no tire tracks? No screams? No struggle? Why did the cameras fail that day? And the biggest one, how does a little girl vanish into thin air? We like to think the world makes sense. That good triumphs. That evil leaves clues. That justice comes for everyone eventually. But Emmaleig's case laughs at those ideas. It's a reminder that sometimes monsters win. That sometimes the only thing left is a question mark. So why does this case haunt us? Because it's not just about Emmaleigh. It's about every parent's worst fear, every town's fragile trust, every detective's sleepless night. It's the mirror held up to our deepest dread, that the world is random, that safety is an illusion, and that the worst things can happen for no reason at all. Emmaleig's story isn't over. Her name still trends online every September. Tips still trickle in, though most lead nowhere. And somewhere, maybe in this town, maybe 1,000 miles away, someone is living with a secret. But secrets are like shadows. They can't survive the light. So if you know something, anything about what happened to Emmaleigh Barringer, don't let the silence win. Speak, because every unanswered question is a wound, and it's time to let this town heal. 17. Let that number sink in. 17 candles on a birthday cake. 17 doodles in a textbook. 17 dreams about prom dresses, first cars, and college applications. Emmaleigh Barringer would be 17 years old today. But instead of blowing out candles, her family blows dust off her untouched toys. Instead of planning her future, They visit a grave that doesn't exist. And instead of hearing her voice, they hear nothing. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about time. Time that keeps moving forward for the rest of us. School bells ringing. Seasons changing. Headlines fading, but froze forever for Emmaleigh. Her classmates graduated middle school, then high school. They got their first jobs, their first heartbreaks, their driver's licenses. Emmaleigh, she's still 10, still wearing mismatched socks, still halfway through 4th grade. Forever. Her mother, Tanya, keeps a list in her head. All the things Emmaleigh will never do. Never ride a roller coaster. Never slow dance at a school gym. Never roll her eyes at a bad joke or slam her bedroom door after a fight. The list grows every year. It's heavy, suffocating, and it's all she has left. But here's what haunts me. Emmaleigh isn't just a memory. She's a question mark etched into the soul of West Virginia. Drive through McDowell County today, and you'll feel it. The way cashiers at the grocery store still glance at the door, half expecting a brown-haired girl to skip inside. The way teachers pause when taking attendance, their throats tightening at the name no one answers to. The way the Appalachian wind seems to whisper her name through the trees, carrying it over rivers and ridges, as if the land itself refuses to let her go. This case isn't cold. It's alive. Every year. On the anniversary of her disappearance, strangers leave stuffed animals at the edge of her family's yard. No notes. No names. Just a row of teddy bears, their glassy eyes staring at the house like silent sentinels. Some are rain-rotted. Some are stolen by stray dogs. But new ones always appear. A quiet rebellion against forgetting. And the tips still trickle in. A psychic claims Emmaleigh is buried near a red barn. A trucker swears he saw her at a rest stop in Ohio. An anonymous letter arrives, postmarked from 3 states away, with a single sentence, "She's closer than you think." Detectives chase them all. Dead ends, every time. But they can't stop. Won't stop. Because the alternative, giving up, is a betrayal too heavy to carry. So why are we still talking about this? Why does a 10-year-old girl from a town you've never heard of matter? Because Emmaleig's story isn't hers alone. It's a reflection of every parent's darkest what if, every town's false sense of security, every detective's unfinished sentence. She's the reason we double-check door locks, the reason we memorize our kids' outfits every morning, the reason we scan parking lots a little too carefully. She's the ghost in the back of our minds, reminding us that safety is a myth and that monsters don't need reasons. But here's the truth. Monsters do leave traces. Someone knows. Someone always knows. A slip of the tongue at a bar, a midnight confession to a lover, a guilty glance at a missing poster. Secrets are like poison. They eat through the container eventually. So if you're listening, and you know anything, speak. Not for the cameras, not for the reward, but for the mother who sleeps with her daughter's pillow pressed to her face. For the father who hears every child's laugh and breaks a little more. For the brother who can't remember the sound of her voice. And for the town that lost its soul the day it realized monsters don't just live in nightmares. This isn't about closure anymore. It's about defiance. Defying the silence. Defying the evil that thinks it won. Defying the idea that a little girl can vanish into nothingness. Emmaleigh Barringer's name will echo as long as we keep saying it. Her face will haunt as long as we keep sharing it. And her story will matter as long as we refuse to look away. So tonight, when you tuck your kids into bed, say her name. When you pass a missing poster, pause. When you hear a laugh that sounds like hers, look. Because the moment we stop asking, what happened to Emmaleigh, is the moment evil wins. And evil? It's already had enough victories.